Vishnum Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Om Antva Ganapatikam Vamahe Kavim Kavinam Upavashravastramam Jeshtarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspada Anushkundhota Biseda Sadhanam Om Mahaganade Namaha. Dear friends, we came to the 24th chapter, further Krishna Leela, about he lifting the Govardhana hill and questions Indra and crushes the pride of Indra by prohibiting the sacrifice intended for Indra in substitute sacrifice in worship of Govardhana hill. When Lord Krishna saw the cowherd men busily preparing for a sacrifice yaga to Indra, he inquired about it from their king Nanda Maharaja. Nanda explained that the rain given by Indra enables all living entities to maintain their lives, and therefore this sacrifice should be executed to satisfy Indra. Krishna responded, it is because of karma alone that living entities take their birth in a certain body, experience varieties of happiness and suffering in that body, and then give it up as the karma pertaining to it runs out. Thus, it is karma alone that is our enemy, our friend and guru. Our friend, our guru, and our Lord. And Indra can do nothing to alter the happiness and distress of anyone, for everyone is tightly bound by his karmic reactions. The material modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance bring about the creation, maintenance, and destruction of this world. The clouds give forth rain when they are impelled by the mode of passion, and cowherds prosper by protecting the cows. Furthermore, the cowherd's proper residence is in the forest on the hills. Therefore, you should offer worship to the cows, the Brahmanas, and Govardhana hill. After Krishna spoke thus, he arranged for the cowherd men to worship Govardhana with the paraphernalia collected for the sacrifice to Indra. He then assumed a huge, unprecedented transcendental form and devoured all the food and other offerings presented to Govardhana. As he did so, he proclaimed to the cowherd community that although they had worshipped Indra for so long, he had never appeared in person, whereas Govardhana himself had now manifested him before their eyes and eaten their offerings of foodstuffs. Therefore, they should all now offer obeisances to Govardhana hill. Then the Lord Krishna joined the cowherds in offering obeisances to his own self, newly assumed form. So this is the summary of the chapter 44th. Comments with Shuka Uvacha. Shuka is telling Parikshit Maharaja, Bhagavanapi tatraiva baladevana samyutaha apesha nivasan gopan indro yagradoto dyaman. Shuka Mahani is telling, Shuka Maharshi is telling Parikshit Maharaja, while staying in that every place with his brother Balarama, Lord Krishna happened to see the cowherd men busily arranging for a sacrifice to Indra. They are busy with arranging yajna in prayers to Indra. According to Sridhara Swami and other acharyas, the words Tatra Eva in this verse indicate that Krishna stayed in the village of the Brahmanas, whose wives had satisfied him by their devotion. Thus he gave his mercy to those Brahmanas as well as to their chaste wives, who had no one associate with except their husbands. In that place, the cowherd men headed by Lord Krishna's father Nanda Maharaja were somehow or other preparing for elaborate yajna, sacrifice conducting in the favor of Lord Indra, and Lord Krishna reacted as follows. Being the omniscient super soul, the Supreme Lord Krishna already understood the situation, yet he still humbly inquired from the elders headed by his father Nanda Maharaja. He asked the question. Lord Krishna asked, my dear father, kindly explain to me what this great endeavor of yours is all about. What is it meant to accomplish? If this is ritual sacrifice, then for whose satisfaction is it intended, and by what means it is going to be executed? Please tell me about it, O Father. I have a great desire to know, and I am ready to hear in good faith. Certainly no secret are kept by saintly personalities who see all others are equal to themselves, who have no conception of mine and another's, and who do not consider who is a friend, who is an enemy, and who is neutral. Lord Krishna's father might have thought that this his son was a mere child and that could not properly question the validity of Vedic sacrifice, but the Lord's clever statement here would certainly have convinced Nanda Maharaja that Sri Krishna was making a serious, not a whimsical inquiry, and that a serious answer should thus be given. One who is neutral may be avoided like an enemy, but a friend should be considered like one's own self. Even Nanda Maharaja did not see his friends, enemies, and neutral parties as entirely equal. Lord Krishna, being Nanda's Maharaja's son, was certainly a most trustworthy friend and should therefore not to be left out of intimate discussions. In other words, Nanda Maharaja might have thought that as a householder, he could not act on the highest sanity, highest saintly platform, and thus Lord Krishna furnished additional reasons why his father should trust him and reveal the entire purpose of the sacrifice. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, Nanda Maharaja stood silent, doubting his position of parental aloofness, since Gardamuni had predicted that his son would be equal to Narayana in his qualities, and the young boy had already conquered and killed many powerful demons. When people in this world perform activities, sometimes they understand what they are doing and sometimes they don't. Those who knew what they are doing achieve success in their work, whereas ignorant people do not. The Lord here informs his father that people should perform a particular ceremony or activity only after thoroughly understanding it through discussion with friends. We should not blind follow of tradition. If a person does not even know what he is doing, how can he be successful in his work? This essentially is the Lord's argument in this verse. Since Lord Krishna, as the young child of Nanda Maharaja, would naturally be expected to show enthusiasm from his father's religious activities, it was the father's duty to give the son thorough explanation of the ceremony. So that's why Nanda Maharaj is telling, such being the case, this ritualistic endeavor of yours should clearly be explained to me. It is a ceremony based on scriptural injunction or simply custom or ordinary society. So Nanda Maharaja replied, the great Lord Indra is the control of the rain, the clouds are his personal representatives, and they directly provide rainwater, which gives happiness and sustenance of all creatures in the world. Without clean rainwater, the earth cannot possibly provide food or drink for everyone, nor could there be a cleanliness. Thus, it would be difficult to overestimate the value of the rain. Not only, my dear son, but also many other men worships him, the Lord and Master of the rain-giving clouds. We offer him grain and other paraphernalia of worship produced through his own discharge in the form of a rain. And the Maharaja patiently tried to explain the facts of life to his young son Krishna. But in fact, Nanda and all the residents of Vrindavana would learn astonishing lesson as explained in this chapter. By accepting the remnants of sacrifices performed to Indra, people sustain their lives and accomplish the threefold aims of religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification. Thus, Lord Indra is the agent responsible for the fruitive success of industrious people. One might object that people sustain themselves by farming, industry, and so on. But as previously mentioned, all human and non-human endeavor depends on food and drink, which cannot be produced without ample rain. But by the word of Trivarga, the Nanda Maharaja further points out that the prosperity achieved through the sacrifice for Indra is meant not merely for sense gratification, but also for religiosity, economic development. Unless people are well fed, it is difficult for them to execute their duties. And without the performance of duty, it's very difficult to be religious. य एवं विसृजेत् धर्मं पारम्पर्यागतं नरः कामल्लोभ्याध्यायते त्वाप्से वैनाप्नोति शोभनम्. The religious principle is based on sound tradition. Anyone who rejects it out of lust, enmity, fear, and greed will certainly fail to achieve good fortune. If a person neglects his religious duties because of the lust, envy, fear, or greed, his wife will never be brilliant or perfect. Shukra Maharshi continued, when Lord Keshava Krishna heard the statements of his father Nanda and other senior residents of Vraja, he addressed his father as follows to arouse anger in Lord Indra. So Lord Krishna is telling his daddy, Lord Krishna said, it is by the force of karma that a living entity takes birth. And it is by karma alone that he meets his destruction. His happiness, distress, and fear and sense of security all arise as the effects of karma. Lord Krishna minimized the importance of gods by seeking the philosophy known as karma vada, karma mimamsa, which basically is atheism with a belief in reincarnation. According to this philosophy, there are subtle laws of nature, and reward or punish us according to how we act. As you know, as you sow, so shall you reap. In a future life, one reaps the fruit of his present work. And this is the sum and substance of reality. Lord Krishna, being a God himself, could hardly be serious proponent of this mediocre philosophy. In the role of the young boy, he was simply teasing his pure devotees by preaching it. Srila Jiva Goswami points out that Lord Krishna was thinking, why are these eternal associates of mine or Lord's main purpose was to take away the false pride of Indra. He also wanted to remind his eternal devotees that they need not divert their attention to other gods, since in fact his devotees were already living with the supreme absolute truth, the Almighty Lord himself. Even if there is some supreme controller who awards all others the results of their activities, he must also depend upon engaging in activity. After all, there is no question of being the bestower of fruitive results unless fruitive activities have actually been performed. Here Lord Krishna argues that if there is a supreme controller, he must depend on a performer of activity to reciprocate with and must therefore also be subject to the laws of karma. Being obliged to award happiness and distress to conditioned souls according to the laws of good and evil, this superficial argument neglects the obvious point that the laws of nature that prescribe the good and bad results of pious and impious acts are themselves creations of all good supreme Lord. Being the creator and sustainer of these laws, the Lord is not subject to them. Furthermore, the Lord is not dependent on the work of conditioned souls. Since he is satisfied and complete within himself, out of his all merciful nature, he awards the results appropriate to our activities. That which we call destiny, fate, or karma is an elaborate and subtle system of rewards and punishments meant for a gradually encouraging conditioned souls to evolve to the stage of perfect consciousness, which is their original constitutional original constitution nature. Supreme Personality of Godhead has so dexterously formulated and applied the laws of material nature, governing punishment and reward for human behavior, that the living being is discouraged from sin and encouraged toward goodness without suffering any significant interference with his free will as an external eternal soul. In contrast to the material nature, the Lord exhibits his essential nature in the spiritual world, where he reciprocates the eternal love of his pure devotees. Such living affairs are based completely on the mutual freedom of the Lord and his devotees, not on a mechanical reciprocation of coinciding selfish interests. The Supreme Lord, assisted by his pure devotees, repeatedly offers the conditioned souls of this world the opportunity to give up their bizarre attempt at exploiting the material universe and go back home, back to Godhead, for an eternal life of bliss and knowledge. Considering all these points, the atheistic arguments given here by Lord Krishna in a playful mood are not to be taken seriously. We came to the sloka 15th. 15th sloka says, Kimendreneha bhutanam swasakarmanuvartinam anishenanyatha kartum swabhava vihitam rinam. Living beings in this world are forced to experience the consequence of their own particular previous work. Since Lord Indra cannot in any way change the destiny of human beings, which is born of their own nature, why should you worship him? So people should understand, Lord Krishna is asking his father, Nanda Maharaja, the living beings, that is we are, in this world are forced to experience the consequences of their own particular previous work. What work we have done in our previous life determines the nature of the work what we are doing now. Since Lord Indra cannot in any way change the destiny of the human beings, which is born of their own nature, why should people worship him? Lord Krishna's argument here is not a negation of free will. If one accepts the existence of karma as a system of laws, awarding reactions for our present activities, then we ourselves, according to our nature, will decide our future. Our happiness and distress in this life have already been adjudicated and fixed according to our previous activities, and not even the gods can change that. They must award us the prosperity or poverty, sickness or health, happiness or distress due us by our previous work. However, we still retain the freedom to select a pious or impious mode of activity in this life, and the choice we make will determine our future suffering and enjoyment. For example, if I was a pious in my last life, in this life, the gods may award me great material wealth, but I am free to spend my riches for good or bad purposes, and my choice will determine my future life. Thus, although no one can change the karmic results due him in this life, everyone still retains his free will, by which he determines what his future situation will be. Lord Krishna's argument here is quite interesting. However, it neglects the overriding consideration that we are all the eternal servants of God and must satisfy him by all that we do. So, by the discussion of Nanda Maharaja and Lord Krishna, the child, we can understand our future life is depend upon the karma what we are doing this life, and present life is it present because of the previous karmas. So whatever karma we are doing is going to affect our future of the life of the person. That's important. One should understand. That's called dharma, karma, punarjanma. When you are doing a dharmic life with a devotional activities, most of the time you will attain punya. At the same time, you should prohibit doing any bad things. You should not undertake any things which is against Shastra. If you do these two things, follow the devotional activities in Bhakti Marga of Lord Krishna, and forget all the evil things and bad things which should not be done in the Shastra, then you are at liberty to reach Krishna in this life itself. This is the understanding of the meaning of this discussion. Every individual is under the control of his own conditioned nature, and thus he must follow that nature. This entire universe, with all its gods, demons, and human beings, is based on the conditioned nature of the living entities. Lord Krishna here elaborates upon the argument given in the previous verse. Since everything depends on Swabhava, or one's conditioned nature, why bother worshipping God or the demigods? Thus, argument would be sublime if Swabhava, or conditioned nature, were all powerful. But unfortunately, it is not. There is a supreme controller, and we must worship him, as Lord Krishna will emphatically reveal in this chapter of the Srimad Mahabhagavatam. For now, however, he is content to reassess his relations with everybody. So we have come to the sloka 17. Dehanuchavachan jantuhu prapsotya jati karmana shatrumitra mudasinaha karmaiva gururishvaraha. Sloka number 17 says, because it is karma that causes the conditioned living entity to accept and then give up different high and low grade material bodies, this karma is his enemy, friend, neutral witness, his spiritual master and controlling Lord. So whatever karma we are doing in this life now is going to lead into a new life depending upon the karma what you do. Even the gods are bound and limited by the laws of karma. That Indra himself is subordinate to the laws of karma. He is explicitly stated in the Brahma Samhita. The Supreme Lord Govinda awards all creatures the appropriate results of their work. This is as true for mighty Indra and also true for a man in the Kali Yuga. The Bhagavad Gita also states, Karmis Thais Tair Krutajjana Prapadyante Nya Naya Devantaha. This is not altogether incorrect to say that God worships is useless, since even the gods are under the laws of karma. In fact, this is the case, but Lord Krishna, the supreme absolute truth, is not subordinate to the law of karma. Rather, he can independently offer or withhold. Therefore, one should seriously worship work itself. A person should remain in the position corresponding to his nature and should perform his own duty. Indeed, that by which we may live nicely is really our worship of deity. Lord Krishna here proposes the modern, if absurd philosophy that our work or occupation is really good and that we should therefore simply worship our work. Upon close scrutiny, we observe that our work is nothing more than the interaction of the material body with the material nature. As Lord Krishna himself states in a more serious mode in the Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter, 28 sloka, Guna Guneshu Guna Gunasya Vartatha. In Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter, 28 sloka says, Guna Guneshu Vartana, Karma Mimamsa. Philosophy accepts that good activity in this life will give us a better next life. If this Guna guneshu vartanta karma mimamsa. Philosophy accepts that good activity in this life will give us a better next life. That's important. People are questioning whom I am going to decide what I'm going to be in future life. This depends upon the karma what you do this life. That's important to understand. If this is true, there must be some type of conscious soul different from the body. And if that is the case, why should you transcendental soul worship? To say that laws have created or are maintaining the world is a meaningless proposition, since there is nothing about the nature of the law that indicates it could generate the extra existential situation. So it's very important to see whatever we do in this life will determine our future life, and God is not going to decide who is going to become what. A man who is always engaged in tamasaguna, eating meat and all sorts of bad things if he does, he will never get a human life anymore. Tamasaguna will lead on to the next birth as an animal. The word sema, simam, means actual prosperity, not merely the accumulation of money. Here our Lord Krishna boldly argues that that just as a woman can never achieve actual dignity, the word kshemam means the actual prosperity, not merely the accumulation of money. Here Lord Krishna boldly argues that just as a woman can never achieve actual dignity or enlightenment from an illicit lover, the residents of the Vrindavana will never be happy by neglecting the real source of their prosperity and worshipping Indra instead. According to Srila Goswami, the audacity that child Krishna displayed before his father and other elders should be understood as an exhibition of transcendental anger aroused when he saw his eternal devotees worshipping an insignificant demigod. Kartetu Brahmana Pro, Shloka 20. Varteta Brahmana Vipro Rajanno Rakshaya Bhuvo Vaishyastu Vartaya Jivo Chodastu Dvisayamaya. The Brahmana maintains his life by studying and teaching the Vedas. The number of royal order of protecting the earth, the Vaishya by trade, and the Shudra by serving the higher twice-born classes. After glorifying karma or work, Lord Krishna now explains what he means by prescribed duties born of one's nature. He is not referring to any whimsical activity, but rather to the religious duties prescribed in the Varnashrama or Vedic society. The sloka number 21, Krishi Vanijya Goraksha Kusidam Turya Muchate Varta Chaturvida Tatra Vayam Govrattayorisham. The occupational duties of the Vaishya are conceived in 4 divisions: farming, commerce, cow, protection, and money lending. Out of these, we as a community are always engaged in cow protection. The causes of creation, maintenance, and destruction are the 3 modes of nature, namely the goodness, passion, and ignorance. In particular, the mode of passion creates this universe, and through sexual combination causes it to The causes of creation, maintenance, and destruction are the 3 modes of nature, namely goodness is sattvika, passion is rajasika, ignorance is tamasaguna. In particular, the mode of passion creates this universe, and through sexual combination causes it to become full of variety. Anticipating the possible objection that a livelihood based on cows certainly depends on Lord Indra, who supplies rain, Lord Krishna here introduces a mechanistic theory of existence known as atheistic Sankhya. The tendency to attribute exclusive causality to the apparently mechanistic functions of nature is an old tendency indeed. 5,000 years ago, Lord Krishna referred to a doctrine already well known in human society. Impelled by the material mode of passion, the clouds pour down their rain everywhere, and by this rain, all creatures gain their sustenance. What was the great Indra to do with this arrangement? Lord Krishna continues his mechanistic explanation of existence, concluding, Mahendra Kim Karishyati, who needs the great Indra? Since the rain sent by the clouds, which in turn are impelled by the mode of passion, is actually producing everyone's food. The word Sarvatha indicates that the clouds magnanimously send their rain even on the ocean, rocks, and barren island, when there is no apparent necessity for such sweet water. My dear father, our home is not on the cities of towns or villages, being forest dwellers. We always live in the forest and on the hills. Lord Krishna here points out that residents of Vrindavana should recognize their relationship with Govardhana hill and with the forest of Vrindavana and not worry about a distant god like Indra. Having concluded his argument, Lord Krishna makes a radical proposal in the following verse. The sloka number 25. Tasmad gavam brahmanana mudda deshatsarabhyadham mukaha ya indraya bhaga sambhavarastarayam sadhata mukaha. Therefore, may a sacrifice for the presence of the cows, the brahmanas, and Govardhana hill begin, with all the paraphernalia collected for worshipping Indra. We are coming to the sloka number 26. Pacyantam vivida pakaha supanta payasadayah samyama pusha shushkalyaha sarvadrohascha grakyatam. The meaning of the 26th sloka, let many different kinds of food or be cooked, from sweet rice to vegetable soups. Many kinds of fancy cakes with both baked and fried should be prepared, and all the available milk products should be taken for this sacrifice. The word supa continues, being broth and its liquid vegetables. Thus, to celebrate the Govardhana Puja, the Lord Krishna called for hot preparations such as soup, cold preparations like sweet rice, and many other types of milk products. The word supa indicates being broth and also liquid vegetables. Thus, to celebrate Govardhana Puja, Lord Krishna called for hot preparation such as soup, cold preparations like sweet rice, and all types of milk products. The Brahmanas who were learned in the Vedic mantras must properly invoke the sacrificial fires. Then you should feed the priest with nicely prepared food and reward them with cows and other gifts. According to Sri Sridhara Swami, Lord Sri Krishna instructed his father and other residents of Vrindavana in the technical details of this Vedic sacrifice to assure the qualified of these Vedic sacrifice to assure the quality of sacrifice and also inspire Nanda and others with faith in concept of such sacrifice. Thus the Lord mentioned that there must be an orthodox brahmanas, regular sacrificial fires, yajna, and proper distribution of charity, and things were to be done in the order given by the Lord. After giving the appropriate food to everyone else, including such fallen souls or dogs and dog eaters, you should give grass to the cows and then present your respectable offering to Govardhana hill. So we are coming to the section 29th of shloka. Swalankrita bhuktavantaha sunulipta suvasanah pradakshinañcha kuruta govi pranala parvatan. After everyone has eaten to his satisfaction, you should all dress and decorate yourselves handsomely, smear your bodies with sandalwood paste, and then circumambulate the cows, the brahmanas, the sacrificial fires, and Govardhana Hill. Lord Krishna wanted all the human beings and even the animals to eat nice Bhagavata Prasadam, sanctified foods offered to the Lord, to enthuse his relatives with a festive mood. He requested them to dress beautifully with fine cloths and ornaments and to refresh their bodies with luxurious sandalwood paste. The essential activity, however, was the circumambulation of the holy brahmanas, cows, sacrificial fires, and especially Govardhana Hill. This is my idea, O my father. You may carry it out if it appeals to you. Such a sacrifice will be very dear to the cows, the brahmanas, and Govardhana Hill, and also to me. Whatever is pleasing to the brahmanas, the cows, Supreme Lord himself, it is auspicious and beneficial for the entire world. Spiritually, blind modern people do not understand this and instead a scientific approach to the life that is rapidly destroying the entire earth. Whatever is pleasing to the brahmanas, the cows, and the Supreme Lord himself is auspicious and not beneficial for the entire world. Spiritually, blind modern people do not understand this and instead adopt a scientific approach to the life that is rapidly destroying the entire earth. So, shloka number 31, Shuka Maharshi is telling this shloka, Kalatmana Bhagavata Shakradharpam Jigamsata Proktam Nishamya Nandadhyaha Swadu Griknanta Dodachaha. The meaning of this shloka is Shuka Maharshi is telling Lord Krishna, who is himself powerful time, desired to destroy false pride of Lord Indra. When Nanda and other senior men of Vrindavana heard Sri Krishna's statement, they accepted his words as proper. Tatamcha Vayudukta Tatacha Vidudum Sarvam Yataha Madhusudanaha Vachayatva Swastayanam Tadbravenya Giridvajan. The cowherd community then did all that Madhusudana had suggested. They arranged for the Brahmanas to recite the auspicious Vedic mantras and using the paraphernalia that had been intended for Indra's sacrifice, they presented offerings to Govardhana Hill and the Brahmanas with reverential respect. They also gave grass to the cows. Then placing the cows, bulls and calves in front of them, they circumambulated Govardhana Hill. The residents of Vrindavana were simply devoted to Lord Krishna. That was the sum and substance of their existence. Being the Lord's eternal associates, they were ultimately not concerned with Lord Indra or ritualistic sacrifice. And they were certainly not interested in the mechanistic philosophy that Krishna had just spoken to them. They simply loved Krishna. Out of intense affection, they did exactly what he had requested. Their simple loving mentality was not small-mindedness or ignorance, since they were devoted to the supreme absolute truth who contains within himself if all existence. Thus the residents of Vrindavana constantly experience the highest essential truth underlying all other truths, and that is Sri Krishna himself, the cause of all causes and that which sustains the existence of all that exists. The residents of Vrindavana were overwhelmed in loving service to the supreme absolute truth, Lord Krishna. Therefore, they were the most fortunate, most intelligent, and most pragmatic of all living beings. As the beautifully ornamented covered ladies followed along riding on wagons driven by oxen, they sang the glories of Lord Krishna. And their songs mingled with the Brahmanas chanting benedictions of Vedic chanting. Krishna then assumed an unprecedented huge form of instilled faith in the covered men, declaring, I am Govardhana mountain. He ate the abundant offerings. In chapter 24, for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada writes, when everything was complete, Krishna assumed a great transcendental form and declared to the inhabitants of Vrindavana that he was himself Govardhana hill in order to convince the devotees that Govardhana hill and Krishna are identical. Then Krishna began to eat all of the food offered there. The identity of Krishna at Govardhana hill is still honored. Krishna assumed a great transcendental form in order to convince the devotees that Govardhana hill and Krishna are identical. Then Krishna began to eat all the food offered there. The identity of Krishna and Govardhana hill is still honored, and great devotees takes rocks from Govardhana hill and worship them exactly they worship the deity of Krishna in the temples. The followers of Krishna consciousness movement may therefore collect small rocks or pebbles from Govardhana hill and worship them at home, because this worship is as good as deity worship. Lord Krishna had induced the residents of Vrindavana to assume a significant risk on his behalf. He convinced them to neglect a sacrifice to what is, after all, the powerful government of the universe, and to worship a hill called Govardhana instead. The covered community did all this simply out of love for Krishna. And now, to convince them that their decision was correct, Lord Krishna appeared in an unprecedented, huge transcendental form. Lord Krishna appeared in an unprecedented, huge transcendental form and demonstrated that he himself is Govardhana hill. Together with the people of Vraja, the Lord bowed down to his form of Govardhana hill, thus in effect offering obeisances to himself. Then he said, just see how this hill has appeared in person and bestowed mercy upon us. It is clear from this verse that Lord Krishna had expanded himself and was appearing in his normal form among the festival goers of Vrindavana, while simultaneously manifesting himself as the great form of Govardhana hill. Thus, in this form, as a child, Krishna led the residents of Vrindavana on bowing down to his new incarnation as Govardhana hill. Lord Krishna's amazing transcendental activities were certainly in keeping with the festive atmosphere. This Govardhana hill, assuming any form he wishes, will kill any residents of the forest who neglect him. Therefore, let us pay our obeisances to him for the safety of ourselves and our cows. Kamarupi indicates that the form of Govardhana can manifest as a poisonous snakes, wild animals, falling rocks, and so on, all of which are competent to kill human beings. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the Lord presented 6 theoretical points in this chapter, that karma alone is sufficient to determine one's destiny. So we should remember, in this chapter, karma alone is sufficient to determine one's destiny. That means whatever karma we are doing in this life will determine what we are going to be in our next life. That one's conditioned nature is the supreme controller. The one conditioned nature is the supreme controller. That the modes of nature are the supreme controller. That Supreme Lord is simply dependent aspect of karma. So that he is under the control of karma, and that one's occupation is the that the modes of nature are the supreme controller. Then the modes of nature are the supreme controller. That the Supreme Lord is simply a dependent aspect of karma. That he is under the control of karma, and that is one's occupation is the actual worshipable deity. The Lord presented these arguments not because he believed them, but rather because he wanted to stop the impending sacrifice of Indra and divert it to himself in the form of Govardhana hill. In this way, the Lord desired to agitate that falsely proud demigod Indra. The last shloka of the chapter, Itradi Godvijamukha Vasudeva Pranatoditaha Yata Vidayate Gopaha Sa Krishna Vrajam Yayuhu. The members of the covered community, having thus been inspired by Lord Krishna, Vasudeva, to properly execute the sacrifice to Govardhana hill, the cows and brahmanas returned with Lord Krishna to their village Vraja. Although the Govardhana Puja was performed in a blissful and successful way, the matter was hardly finished. Lord Indra is, after all, tremendously powerful and received the news of the Govardhana sacrifice with a burning anger. What ensued will be described in the following chapter. Thus ends the reports. The members of the covered community, Gokula, having thus been inspired by Lord Vasudeva to properly execute the sacrifice to Govardhana hill, the cows and the brahmanas returned with Lord Krishna to their village. Although the Govardhana Puja was performed in a blissful and successful way, the matter was hardly finished. Lord Indra is, after all, tremendously powerful and received the news of the Govardhana sacrifice with a burning anger. What ensued will be described in the following chapter. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 10th canto, 24th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavata Puranam, entitled Worshipping Govardhana Hill. The next chapter is Govardhana Parvata. He is going to lift Govardhana hill in the next chapter. This chapter describes how Lord Indra was overcome by anger when the residents of Vraja cancelled his sacrifice, how he tried to punish them by sending forth a devastating rainfall to Vrindavana, and how Lord Sri Krishna protected Gokula by lifting Govardhana hill and for 7 days using it as an umbrella to ward off the rain. Indra, angered at the disruption of the sacrifice meant for him and falsely presuming himself as the supreme controller, said, "People often give up the pursuit of transcendental knowledge. People often give up the pursuit, means of self-realization. Imagine that they can cross over the ocean of material existence by mundane fruitive activities and sacrifices. Similarly, these covered men have become intoxicated by the pride and have offended me by taking shelter of an ignorant ordinary child Krishna. To remove this supposed pride of the residents of Vraja, Indra sent the clouds known as Samavartaka. The cloud's name is Samavartaka, whose function is to destruction of the world with a heavy rainfall. He sent them to harass the Vrajavasis with the downpours of rain and hail. The covered community was very disturbed by this and approached Krishna for shelter. Understanding that this trouble was the work of Indra, Krishna decided to smash the pieces of Indra's false prestige, and thus he lifted Govardhana hill with one hand. He then invited the entire covered community to take shelter in the dry space beneath the mountain. He then invited the entire covered community to take shelter on the dry space beneath the mountain. For 7 successive days, he held up the hill until Indra finally understood Krishna's mystic power and ordered clouds to withdraw. Imagine Lord Krishna was only a young boy. 7 successive days, he's holding his Govardhana hill on the left hand in the little finger. When the covered villagers emerged from beneath the mountain, Krishna put Govardhana hill back on its proper place after 7 days, when the cowards were in ecstasy, showing loving symptoms such as flowing tears and bodily hair standing on the end. They embraced Krishna and offered him benedictions according to their respective positions, while the gods in heaven rained down flowers and sang the Lord's praises. So, this is the 25th chapter. The shloka meaning Shukavacha Indrastadatmanaham Pujam Vijnayam Yutan Rupa Gopebhyaha Krishnanathebhyo Nandadibhyostukopasaha. So Indra became angry because Shukavarshi is telling King Parikshit, when Indra understood that sacrifice for Indra had been put aside, he became furious with Nanda Maharaj and other coward men who were accepting Krishna as their Lord. As the very beginning of this chapter, Shuka Maharshi reveals the foolishness of Indra and the absurdity of his anger. Indra has frustrated because the residents of Vrindavana accepted Lord Krishna as their Lord. But the simple fact is that Sri Krishna is the Lord. Sri Krishna is the Lord not only of the residents of Vrindavana, but for all that exists in the whole world, including Indra himself. Thus, Indra's petulant reaction was ridiculous. As the common saying goes, pride goes before a fall. Angry Indra sent forth clouds of universal destruction known as Samarthaka. Imagining himself the supreme controller, he spoke as follows. The word Ishamani here is significant. Indra arrogantly considered himself to be the Lord, and thus he exhibited the typical attitude of conditioned soul. Many thinkers in the 20th century have noted the exaggerated sense of individual prestige characteristic of our culture. Indeed, writers have been coined the phrase, the me generation. Everyone in this world is more or less guilty of the syndrome called Isamana, or proudly considering oneself as the Lord. They themselves they are the Lord. Just see how these coward men living in the forest have become so greatly intoxicated by their prosperity. They have surrendered to an ordinary human being, Krishna, and thus they have offended the gods. Of course, Indra was really saying that both coward men and offered him, Indra, by taking shelter of Krishna, whom Indra considered to be Marteya, immortal. They are taking shelter under the Krishnas, just like that foolish attempt of men who abandon transcendental knowledge of the self and instead try to cross over the great ocean of material existence in the false boats through ritual sacrifices. Those coward men have acted inimically toward me by taking shelter of this ordinary human being, Krishna, who thinks himself very wise, but who is simply a foolish, arrogant, overall talkative child. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, though insults Indra, goddess Saraswati is actually praising Krishna. The Acharya explains, Vachalam means one who speaks English language fluently. To the clouds of destruction of King Indra said, the prosperity of these people has made them mad with pride, and their arrogance is backed up by Krishna. Now go and remove their pride and bring their animals to destruction. It is clear from this verse that the residents of Vrindavana had become highly prosperous simply by protecting cows, since Indra wanted to destroy their so-called pride based on wealth by killing their animals. Well-tended cows produce large quantities of milk, from which come cheese, butter, yogurt, ghee, and so on. These foods are delicious and by themselves and also enhance other foods, such as fruits, vegetables, and grains. Bread and vegetables are delicious with butter, and fruit is especially appetizing when mixed with the cream of our yogurt. Dairy products are always desirable in civilized society, and surplus can be traded for many valuable commodities. Thus, simply by Vedic dairy enterprises, the residents of Vrindavana, we were wealthy, healthy, and happy, even in the material sense, and most of all, they were eternal associates of the Supreme Lord Krishna. I will follow you to Vraja, riding on my elephant Airavata, and taking with me the swift and powerful wind gods to decimate the covered village of Nanda Maharaja. Samarthaka clouds were frightened by Indra's powerful mood and thus carried out his order as described in the following verse. Shukovacha Mane Shukovacha Shuka Maharshi is telling, on Indra's order, the Samavartaka clouds of universal destruction, released ultimately untimely from their bonds, went to the covered pastures of Nanda Maharaja. There they began to torment the inhabitants by powerful pouring down torrents of rain upon them. Samavartaka clouds could cover the entire earth with a single vast ocean. With a great strength, these clouds began flooding the simple land of Vraja. विद्योत्तमाना विदुधि स्तनन्तः स्तनयित्नुभिः तेर्वेर्महद्वन्मन्नना विमृशुज्ज्वललक्षकर्षकरा. Propelled by the fearsome wind gods, and the clouds blazed with lightning bolts and roared with thunder as they hurled down hailstones. Heavy rain and hailstones came on the Vrajabhumi. As the clouds released torrents rain as thick as massive columns, the earth was submerged in the flood, and high ground could no longer be distinguished from the low. The cows and other animals, shivering from the excessive rain and wind, and the covered men and ladies, pained by the cold, all approached Lord Govinda for shelter. Trembling from the distress brought about the severe rainfall and trying to cover their hands and calves with their own bodies, the cows approached the lotus feet of Supreme Personality of Godhead also. The 13th sloka is a very nice prayer to Lord Krishna. Krishna Krishna Mahabhaga Tvanattam Gokulam Prabho Tratur Margasi Devanam Kupita Daksha Vastalaha Kupitat Bhakta Vatsalaha. The cowherd men and women addressed the Lord Krishna. Krishna, O most fortunate one, please deliver the cows from the wrath of Indra. O Lord, you are so affectionate to your devotees. Please save us also. That is the prayer of the Vrajavasis. At the time of Lord Krishna's birth, Gargamuni had predicted Anena Sarva Durgani Yuvam Ajnas Tarishyataha. By his grace, you will easily cross beyond all difficulties. The residents of Vrindavana were confident that in such a great emergency, Lord Sri Narayana would empower Krishna to protect them. They accepted Krishna as everything, and Krishna is reciprocated every love. Shloka 14th. Shilavarsha nipatena hanyamana machetanam niriksha bhagavan mene kupitendram kratam harihi. Seeing the inhabitants of his Gokula rendered practically unconscious by the onslaught of hail and blasting wind and rain, the Supreme Lord Hari understood that this was the work of angry Indra. Sri Krishna said to himself, because we have stopped this sacrifice, Indra has caused this unusually fierce, unseasonable rain, and together with terrible winds and hail. By mystic power, I will completely counteract this disturbance caused by the Indra. Gods like Indra are proud of their opulence, and out of foolishness they falsely consider themselves the lord of the universe. I will now destroy such ignorance. That's what Krishna is doing. Since the gods are endowed with mode of goodness, the false pride of considering oneself if the Lord should certainly not affect them. When I break the false prestige, those bereft of goodness, my purpose is to bring them relief. The gods are supposed to be Sadbhava Yukta, endowed with spiritual existence. Since they are deputed servants of the Supreme Lord, in the Bhagavad Gita it is stated that which is duly offered to the Lord becomes spiritualized. The gods engage in the devotion service of the Lord by managing various departments of cosmic administration. Therefore, as gods or as servants of the Lord, their existence is pure, should be pure Sadbhava. When the gods fail to live up to the high position given them by the Lord and deviate from proper behavior, they are not acting as gods but rather as conditioned souls. Manaha, or false prestige, is certainly an anxiety-ridden burden for the conditioned soul. A falsely proud person is not truly peaceful or satisfied because his understanding of himself is false and inflated. When a servant of the Lord becomes asat or irreligious, the Lord saves him from impiety by breaking the false prestige that has led him to be offensive or sinful, as stated by the Lord himself. Yashyaham anugrahanami harisye tada danam sanaha. I give my blessings to a person by taking away his so-called opulence. Of course, the advanced stage of devotional service to the Lord, as described by Rupa Goswami, is Yukta Vairagya. Utilizing the opulence of this world to execute the Lord's mission. Obviously, the things of this world can be used wonderfully to spread the glories of God and to create godly society, and a more advanced devotee will not be seduced by material paraphernalia, but will dutifully and honestly engage it solely for the pleasure of the Lord. In this particular case, Lord Indra forgot that he was a humble servant of God, and Lord Krishna therefore arranged to bring this bewildered demigod to his senses. I must therefore protect the covered community, my transcendental potency, for I am their shelter. I am their master, and indeed they are my own family. After all, I have taken a vow to protect my devotees. So that's how the Lord Krishna decided. The word, having said this, Lord Krishna himself, who is Vishnu himself, picked up Govardhana hill with one hand and held it aloft just as easily as a child holds up a mushroom. It is confirmed that Harivamsha, that Sri Krishna picked up the Govardhana mountain with his left hand. Sadrata Sangrata Mehagar Girihi Savena Puna Panina. With his left hand, he picked up the mountain which was touching the clouds. According to Srila Vasanta Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura, when Lord Krishna was preparing to lift Govardhana hill, a partial expansion of his Yogamaya potency named Samrikti, Samahriki, temporarily removed all the rain from the sky so that as he ran very swiftly from the porch of his house to the mountain, neither his turban nor other garments became wet. The Lord then addressed the cowherd community, O mother, O father, O residents of Vraja, if you wish, you may now come under his hill with your cows. When Indra's attack began, the Lord Krishna lifted the Govardhana hill. The deer, wild hogs, and other animals and birds standing on the hill's flanks climbed up to its peaks, and even they did not experience the slightest distress. You should have no fear that this mountain will fall from my hand, and don't be afraid. of the wind and rain, for your deliverance from these afflictions has already been arranged. Their minds thus pacified by Lord Krishna, they all entered beneath the hill, where they found ample room for themselves and all their cows, wagons, servants, and priests, and for all other members of the community as well. All the domestic animals of Vrindavana were brought beneath Govardhana hill for shelter. Lord Krishna, forgetting hunger and thirst and putting aside all considerations of personal pleasure, stood there holding up the hill for 7 days as the people of Vraja gazed upon him. According to the Vishnu Purana, Lord Krishna held up the mountain while his praises were chanted by the residents of Vraja, all of whom now had the opportunity to dwell together with him and who glanced at him with joyful and amazed eyes. Thus the covered men and women were all elated, and out of loving affection, they opened their eyes wide. By continuously drinking the nectar of the beauty and sweetness of Sri Krishna, the residents of Vrindavana felt no hunger, thirst, or fatigue. And Lord Krishna, by seeing their beautiful forms, also forgot about eating, drinking, and sleeping. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura points out that 7 days of continuous rain from the Samortaka clouds failed to flood the district of Mathura. So in spite of heavy rain, the flood, the district of Mathura becomes, because the Supreme Lord simply by his potency immediately dried up the water as it fell to the ground. Thus Krishna's lift in Govardhana hill is full of fascinating details and has for thousands of years remained one of his most famous pastimes, Krishna Leela. When Indra observed this exhibition of Lord Krishna's mystic power, he became most astonished. Pulled down from his platform of false pride and his intentions are thwarted, he ordered his clouds to desist. Stop. The cloud was asked, Indra asked the clouds to stop. Seeing that the fierce wind and rain had now ceased, the sky had become clear rain clouds and the sun had arisen, Lord Krishna, the lifter of Govardhana hill, spoke to the covered community as follows. Lord Krishna said, my dear covered man, please go out with your wives, children, and possessions. Give up all fear. The wind and rain have stopped, and the waters have subsided. After collecting their respective cows and loading their paraphernalia into their wagons, the covered men went out. The women, children, and elderly persons gradually followed them. While all living creatures looked on, the Supreme Personality of Godhead put down the hill in its original place, just as it had stood before. So Lord Krishna left the Govardhana hill place where it was before. All the residents of Vrindavana were overwhelmed with ecstatic love and pride. They came forward and greeted Sri Krishna according to their individual relationship with him. Some embraced him, others bowing down to him, and so forth. The cowherd woman presented water mixed with yogurt and unbroken barley corns as a token of honor, and they showered auspicious benedictions upon Lord Krishna. Mother Yashoda, Mother Rohini, Nanda Maharaj, and Balaram, the greatest of the strong, all embraced Krishna. Overwhelmed with affection, they offered him their blessings. Sloka 31. Divideva Gana Sadhyaha Siddhi Gandharva Charanaha Tusturvo Muchustusta Pushta Varshani Parthiva. In the heavens, O King, all the gods, including the Siddhas, Sadhas, Gandharvas, and Charanas, sang the praises of Lord Krishna and showered down flowers in great satisfaction. The gods in heaven were just as jubilant as the residents of Vrindavana, and thus a great universal festival took place both in the heaven and in the Bhuloka. My dear Parikshit, the gods in the heaven resoundingly played their conch shells and kettle drums, and the best of Gandharvas, led by Tumburu, began to sing. ततोऽनुरुक्तै पशुषे परिश्रुतो राजन् स गोष्ठं सबलो व्रजोद्धरी तथा विधानस्य कृतानि गोपिका गायन्त ईयमूर्धिता हृदिस्पृशः. Surrounded by his loving covered boyfriends and Lord Balarama, Krishna then went off to the place where he had been tending his cows. The covered girls returned to their homes, singing joyfully about the lifting of Govardhana hill and other glorious deeds performed by Lord Krishna, who had so deeply touched with their hearts. Before returning to their homes, the gopis shared intimate association with their lover Sri Krishna by exchanging secret glances. Ordinarily, they could not publicly talk about Krishna since they were chaste young girls in a religious village, but now they took advantage of his wonderful exhibition by the Lord and freely sang of his beautiful qualities. It is natural that a young man wants to do something wonderful in the practice of beautiful young girls. The gopis were the most beautiful and pure-hearted young girls, and Sri Krishna performed the most wonderful activities in their presence. Thus he entered the deep within their tender hearts, enlivening their eternal devotion to him. Thus ends the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 10th canto, 25th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Sri Krishna Lifts Govardhana Hill, is completed. नमोस्तुनन्ताय सहस्रमूर्तये सहस्रपादक्षुर्वसहस्रोने सहस्रवने सहस्रनाम्ने पुरुषार्थे सहस्रकोटियुगधारिणे नमः. आकाशात् परितम्यताविर्सागरं सर्वदेव नमस्कारः. श्रीकेशवं प्रजत्यो नमः. सर्ववेदेशत्पुण्यं सर्वतीर्थेषु यत्फलं तत्फलं प्राप्य वासनात् वासुदेवस्य वासन्ते जयत्रयं सर्वभूतनिवासोऽसि वासुदेव नमस्ते कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. Next, we will go to 26th chapter, where he is going to do some more Krishna Leela. You will see tomorrow. Thank you.